This is what I'm calling the kind of global power panel. Here you have people representing lots of markets, lots of interests, lots and lots of dollars. So what I'm going to very quickly do, just to begin with, is to allow them to quickly introduce themselves, very quickly, those that haven't spoken yet, and to answer the question, is there such a thing as a global strategy? Is there such a thing as making a global game that can succeed kind of globally? So we'll start from the far end. Is that Perry? I can't see from here.
Yeah. Hi everyone, this is Andy.
Andy, sorry.
I'm CEO and founder of FunPlus. FunPlus is social and mobile developer based in Asia. It's probably the biggest one outside of China. We have around 6 million daily active users in Facebook and mobile. We have around 250 people spread it in Beijing, San Francisco, and Vancouver. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kyu Lee from Gamevil USA. I'm president of Gamevil USA. Gamevil's been doing mobile games since 2000, so we've been around for a very long time. And so we currently have, if you include all of our affiliate companies, we have around 1,000 employees around the world. The way we look at the global market is we look at it 4 different markets. The Korean market, where we're headquartered, Japan, China, and then the rest of the world is the way we look at it. We have offices for those reasons in those 4 territories. And we're trying to source games from all over the world to do global penetration properly.
Hi everyone, my name is Deepika. I consider myself as a social mobile gaming enthusiast. I've been in the helm of social and mobile since the very onset of Facebook and iOS, and I've been on the developer side as well as on the publisher side and the advertising side. Have been with Tapjoy, PlayFirst, Capcom Mobile, and my recent 2 days ago I've moved to another company called Redlink. So I come with a varied experience on this space and platform. In terms of the global game strategy, I believe that one has to focus on looking at what exactly your game genre is and whether it's casual or hardcore or midcore, and then consider what kind of target markets you're going to go after. I believe knowing who your target market is very important in your game strategy, and if it's relevant to the whole wide world, yes, it makes sense. But if it is something that's a niche product, you need to think about what kind of characters, localization, and things like that you need to put. In one of the conversations that I've recently had, there was a term that came out, which was culturalization. And I really believe culturalization to certain game genres makes a whole lot of sense. Thank you.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Steve Gray. I'm actually head of production for Tencent Games, so I oversee our product pipeline in games for both mobile and PC and whatever else, web games. I'm sort of doing double duty in biz dev a little bit lately. I think that for Tencent, right now our focus really still is on China. So in terms of global strategy, what we're interested in doing is sourcing product, because we think there's great product all over the world, and while some products do have elements of them that are culturally obscure, say, to other cultures, right? Like there's games in China that are very, very focused on Chinese history and say the Three Kingdoms era. Like there's a lot of those that if you exported them to the rest of the world, people might not have very much context for why those characters are there and why they do the things they do, so they might be difficult. But in general, I think gameplay itself, like game mechanics, are not very culturally specific. Something that's fun for somebody in one part of the world is fun for somebody in another part of the world. So it's really a question of the content that's wrapped around it. And that isn't to say, by the way, that all content should be sort of somehow globally homogenized. I think that would be a horrible idea, right? I mean, But it is something to watch out for when you're thinking about where you're going to release your products. I think that in terms of Tencent's own strategy in the rest of the world, obviously you can see that we're trying to launch WeChat all over the world. In terms of the rest of it, I don't think we're really in a very good place to say. I think over the next year you'll probably hear various people at Tencent talking about what we'd like to do ourselves outside of China. So, thanks.
Cool. You obviously, well, Peter, do you have a view on the Angry Birds? Obviously, is a global smash. So, do you think it? Do you agree that you can be a global games publisher? Is that an ambition, or should you be more kind of local focused? That's kind of the question I was asking.
I think that you can definitely be global, but of course you need to take into account kind of like local characteristics. And again, I mean, I mentioned another great red brand, Coke. They're everywhere, but Coke is not exactly the same everywhere. So they also kind of like have to take into account, doing different things in China than in the US. So I think that of course you can run a global business and you can be a very global company in games, and I think games is and all of entertainment, it's a very, very global business by nature, but it doesn't mean that you take this like one size fits all approach, and kind of like you need to kind of like be smart about it. And again, that's why again I travel a fair bit, because I need to know what's going on in China and Japan and Korea and the US.
You do travel a fair bit. So yeah, I mean, Tommy spoke a little bit earlier about this already, but I mean, King are a global company, and Candy Crush is similar all over the world. Do you think that's an outlier? We'll get to the guys at the end. Sorry. Do you think that things like Candy Crush and Clash of Clans, Heyday, etc., do you think they're outliers, or is that going to be the future where these single games will kind of dominate everywhere?
Well, I think if the core gameplay is simple enough, it's definitely universal. Fun is fun all over the world. If it's in that core mechanic, if it's a bigger game with a story and characters, then it becomes another beast.
Okay. So Oli, you'd like to introduce yourself, and obviously you've got a different perspective. So yeah, what do you think? Do you see there's going to be more and more kind of global successful businesses, or are you seeing a lot more local successes that don't translate?
Hello everybody, I'm Oli Bernard from App Annie. So yes, I mean, I would agree with a little bit of King and Rovio. It depends of your core mechanic, obviously, on each game, but also the attention that you pay to what's your strategy to go around the world. Do you like to go to China first? Do you go target Western countries first? And you have to trigger some things within your games to have a proper strategy first, and then you become truly global. You don't becoming global just by launching everywhere and just hoping the best is happening because you have a very good core mechanic, for example. You need to have a strategy. You need to understand where to go, have launch plans, etc. I mean, it's pretty basic what I'm just saying now, but it's very important. And we see some very successful guys who are very good in some countries and then grow in Asia, or the opposite, grow in the Western world and then grow in Asia.
Yeah. Okay. And Perry, I mean, you're a successful developer as well. I mean, do you set out with a kind of global approach when you're making a game, or do you think this is going to be released everywhere, and what's your kind of approach?
Sure. So maybe I introduce myself first. My name is Perry Tam. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Storm 8. So for those of you who might not know Storm 8 is a game developer. We develop over 40 titles, and we self-develop all of them, and we publish them as well. And one thing that is on top of developing games, we are also one of the largest gaming network on mobile. We have over 50 million monthly active users in our network. And we have been around 5 years now. We started in 2009, and before that I worked at Facebook and helped them with the Facebook credit stuff. So kind of go back to answering your question, Chris, there. I believe there's, definitely from Stormy's perspective, we're a global company. We look at the world globally. When we launch a product, we also want to tap into the global opportunity. But I think one thing to keep in mind is that you always want to make sure you launch something that at least work in your local market, right? And you prove out the mechanics, you prove out the game actually has a great appeal, and then you kind of start getting into how do you get it global. And I think the key there that we start with less than 10 people 5 years ago, and then now we have over 250 employees, totally self-funded bootstrap company. And the way that we kind of did that is you prove out the mechanic, you find the right game, but then figuring out how to distribute in each one of those regions is really hard. For the reason that kind of Steve pointed out in his earlier slide, there's so many app stores in China, right? So figuring out the Chinese market is tough. And it goes the same to many different regions. So just don't take things for granted. I think that's the key thing. You have a game that works, that's kind of your entry to the game, that's your admission ticket. The real crux is, can you crack the code of distributing worldwide?
Okay. So I've got a fair few issues to get into. One thing I want to talk about, there's a lot of mentions obviously of kind of China, and we're going to talk later sessions about China, Korea and Japan, and more information about publishing in those areas. Is it fair to say that the power has kind of shifted now? I mean, this is something, Oli, you can maybe feed into as well. Has the kind of power shifted? Because obviously the Western kind of markets have been, iOS and Android have been driving things, and now it looks to me like China, Japan, and kind of Korea are calling the pace. Do you see that from your side, from App Annie? Do you see that's the way it is now? That's kind of almost the first place to go?
Well, yes and no.
That's fine. You can be nuanced.
We see obviously China, South Korea, and Japan doing extremely well, especially on Google Play, but also iOS. I mean, China is number 2 in downloads in November and December for games on iOS. I would say it depends again of your strategy. If you want to make money on Google Play, yes, you have to address South Korea. If you want to make money on iOS, well, you have no choice. You have to address the US.
Yeah.
So it's not that simple. Yes, Asia is growing. Yes, if you put Japan, South Korea, and China together, they're probably bigger than the Western market. But in terms of monetization, you don't have to dismiss countries such the US, the UK, Germany, France. There is still money there. And on a per user basis, if you put Japan away, these guys are still making quite a lot of money in the Western world.
So it's Android and its traffic and volume outside of Japan in the Asian markets more, and revenue still, the higher revenues are still kind of happening.
Yeah, I would say that's a fair representation.
Do you think? I mean, Tommy and Peter, is that? Do you see that as well? Is that backing up? How do you look at it? I mean, you've got massive games, and you're obviously putting new games out. How important are the Asian markets when you start thinking as part of your strategy of a new title? Is it published first in Europe and US and get that away and then move, or are you just thinking straight away, is this going to work everywhere?
At King we've gone out and said that we're interested in growing in the Asian markets, and we have had the approach of looking at them and trying to learn what would be the best strategy forward for us. And as I mentioned earlier in my slide with Kakao, it was about finding the right social network and integrating the game to that. I think that it's very tricky to speak about Asia as one region.
Sure, I appreciate that.
It's definitely at least, three big, very important markets that work very differently. And it's been fun to go to Korea and see how different it is from Europe.
Yeah.
Again, as a game developer, obviously you should work with game that you're very passionate about, and it's very hard to make games for somebody else that you don't understand really. So if you have a good test market and you can try on that.
So, but you're still very much build it in the West, and then how do we adapt, rather than thinking, it's not like how this is going to work in Korea or how it's working in China isn't among those first thoughts when you're developing a new game.
Well, we do have a try first. We try in a very early phase. We have this recipe for making games where we try just the core mechanics first on King.com. So that is something that we can check that the mechanics and the themes is working in which market, and then we could go to that.
Do you have anything to add to that, Peter, before I switch my head around?
I think that Yeah, we look at kind of the whole world, but again, yeah, you can't look at like Asia as Asia. And I would say that if you look at what we've done over the last few years, I mean, our first office outside of Helsinki, Shanghai, then Tokyo, then Seoul. So we have people on the ground in those markets, and I think that there's kind of like no other way to really, if you're serious about those markets, and of course for us it's about more than just games. I mean, we have a big licensing, merchandising business in all of those as well. So it's again, we have to be there. We have to be more local than the locals. So I mean, we want to be more Chinese than the Chinese companies, and same applies like every market.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess with this side, we're coming from the other side a bit more. So, obviously, you guys, you know, Q particularly, sort of Korea is your home market. You're very dominant, very strong there. When you're developing games now, how globally do you think initially? Obviously, you've got a big portfolio. It depends game to game. But are you thinking what's going to... There are games that we're thinking how they're going to be received in Europe and US at the same time as how they're going to be conceived in our home market? Or you start first in Korea and then sort of change?
Well, in general, we try to source games that fit certain markets. That's the reason why I'm sourcing games from the US market too. But overall, as you saw in Tim's presentation, you know, the Asian market is growing extremely fast, and I think the best benchmark is to look at the traditional gaming companies where they're making their money today. Like if you look at the online gaming space, without an Asian strategy, you're not going to survive. I think one of the biggest reasons why companies like EA are struggling is because they haven't put out a really good Asian strategy. The only Western companies that are succeeding today is maybe Activision Blizzard with their WoW franchise, and then Riot Games, which is now Tencent. And if you look at the top grossing online PC games in the world, all of them are from, like, the top 5 are pretty much all from Asia. And I think the mobile space is going to eventually become like that. And if you just taking out Asia as a picture is saying you're just reducing the size of your max revenue.
Okay. Tim, do you have Steve? Tim? I made Tim up. Steve, do you have anything to add to that from your perspective? I mean, obviously you're massively strong in China and kind of coming the other way. So.
Yeah, so I wanted to, we've made some experiments in trying to directly build Chinese products overseas, where we went to, a group of people who we thought were very good, and they really wanted to get into China, and we said, okay, we're going to help you build a Chinese product.
Yeah.
And those projects did not go really very well. And I think the reason that they didn't go really well is that it's much easier for a group of people to so if you're building any kind of online game, whether it's a mobile game or a PC game or whatever, it's an iterative process of working with your audience. And trying to work with an audience that is foreign to you, that speaks a language that you can neither read nor write, you cannot get on the forums, you can't talk to people, you can only work through us, is a really, really hard way to get through sort of the beginning of that, of having that communication with your audience and figuring out where to take the product. So those projects didn't really work out very well, and I think what we think is that it would have been better for those teams to work in their home markets or work in markets they're more familiar with, and then when the product started to get heated up and things were figured out, then you could go and bring it to other places. And also one of you guys said, I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, who said that it's very important to have a launch plan for each of your territories. So so you can't just, we've also tried, honestly, here's another thing we tried, it didn't work. We tried to launch products into multiple territories simultaneously. And even with sort of basically unlimited funds, that didn't work. I mean, it just failed, not because we could not fund a team that was theoretically big enough to do it. It's because the team couldn't do it, because it was just too complicated, and there are too many pieces moving in too many different directions in different places. So I think that you've got to you've got to start someplace that you know and place that it's easy for you to work in, and get to the point where you have confidence in which the product is really starting to work well, and then you can go to other places. Now, I think you could, if you wanted to think ahead about sort of cultural sensitivities and maybe try and, like, I don't know, you could, if you're an American developer, you might not do something that required you to know, like, who the big gangsters in the 1930s were. Yeah. Because somebody in China, like, they're not really going to know that. So if that was somehow key to your game design, maybe that part of the content design wouldn't survive. That doesn't mean that if you have a super great mechanic, you couldn't take that great mechanic and reskin it with some other content and make it work in China. Yeah. But I think that, given all those possibilities, the getting your game to work at all and getting the core compulsion loops to work and to make people both happy with the fact that they're playing the game, happy with the fact, hopefully, that they're giving you some money, because it's important that that the monetization of the game be integrated into the compulsion loops of the game in a way that players feel is reasonable. And getting that right is so much more important than everything else. So don't try and do that someplace that's too far away or that's too culturally removed from your dev team.
So I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, really. It's you've got to have a global strategy, but you've got to get it right locally first and pick your market that makes sense.
Chris, I have another point. I think one should also think about a first mover advantage. Because US opened up earlier for the App Store. I mean, there was a first mover advantage, and now there are people who already dominate that. And then now Asia is opening up. So there is advantage on the other side because it's not that crowded right now. So looking at that, I think one has to assess where they're coming from. Do they have that advantage or not? I think as of right now, maybe 4 years ago, US was the right move. At this point of time, the power shift could be, if you're looking for more downloads and you want to build a brand and you want to have a mass adoption, you probably want to go on the APAC and Asian side.
Okay, that's really interesting. So just to change track a little bit, change focus a little bit, the other track, a lot of today and yesterday was about indie developers. We did a session in the States a while back with Christian Siegerstrahler, who's a guy who's one of the CEOs of Glue, and he helped with Supercell and lots of other things. Very, very well connected guy, very smart guy. He's an investor now, and he was saying that. In his presentation, he was saying that he thinks we're now in the era of the $1 million game, that is the investment you have to be prepared to make, if you're at all serious about mobile games. Obviously, you can make games on a lower budget, but if you really want to have a crack at this market now, $1 million is kind of where you need to start thinking to spend. And that's not ongoing marketing, that's kind of your initial build the game and kind of first push. Is that fair? Do you think that's borne out in your kind of experiences? I'll go back to the corner because Andy, we've not heard from you for a little while. So
I want to add some comments from developer perspective. Yeah. Because FunPlus is a pure developer before in the last 3 years. We have another comment from publishers already, but what I feel is really as a developer, it really matters is what you are good at, and because realistically, you always need to pick one market and one type of game you will start with, and then you need to make the matrix really well before you really go global, because different market has different needs for the games. You can't really make every game is all like Candy Crush Saga, all global and 2 billion users, 1 billion users. I feel realistically because FunPlus grows from 10 people to 250 people in the last 3 years. So what I feel is most important for the globalization is when you have the game right for the matrix, then you go out to look at one or two countries or 2 or 3 countries which actually fit your game better. For example, if you're a PvP game, PvE game, you might looking at Chinese market, Korean market, and if you are like a really social gaming, really casual gaming, you might do a pure global strategy. And also, I think another thing is really important is really about what stage the company is, right? Because we went from 10 people to 250 people, what we found is at the beginning, we always want to try different publishers. We want to go global. Because we are really small, we want to earn money. We want to survive. And then when we get into some stage, we found out if you are actually top 3 in any region, like any big region, you can make a big company. If you are not top 3 in Asia, you are the biggest. If you are top 3 in US, you're one of the biggest. Even if you are top 3 in Russia, I'm pretty sure you are one of the biggest gaming company, right? So when we go to the stage, which we focus more, you want to be leaders in some specific location.
Sure.
And then actually when you are the leaders, then you really want to go global again.
Okay.
Because you don't want to miss any territories. You don't want to miss anything. Then I think the last step is really about operation, the global operation ability. Because the most important thing is you build a global team and operation team which can sustainable in the long term. Because gaming business is a hit. I mean, I couldn't say it's a hit business, but sorry. Just a lot of people say it's a hit business. But if you want to maintain the sustainable ability, you can't make money from one game for 20 years. You basically need to make multiple games. You want to know the market more. Then you need a local operation team. That's what I mean. So if you really want to go global, look at a different stage. If you're stage 1, then you really just try to talk with different people, find the possible partners to deal with a lot of difficulties, which you can. If you're stage 2, then focus to be top 3 company. I'm pretty sure King is already there. Yeah. So, but some of the companies are not there. We're trying to do that. Yeah. And then the third one is really build an international, really operation team with expertise.
Okay.
And dominate.
No, that's good. That's good. That's good. Sorry, that's the previous question, but that's all useful from a developer's perspective. So, from a developer perspective, what we're talking about, we also talked about the kind of the cost of making games now. I mean, do you have a price range that you can offer? Is $1 million? Is that a thing that makes sense to you, or do you think that's way too high? Is that as the average kind of cost of producing a mobile game? Obviously, it's going to vary slightly, but now that we're all free to play and it's a service rather than a one-off thing.
I mean, I think it varies. It varies in the market. So because we focus a lot in the Western market. Yeah. So the way we build the games is, we're not really putting 10 million budget for that. Sure. Usually what we do is we put actually great people. We try to hire compose a team with 10 to 15 people. Of course, the salary matters. Yeah. It's definitely over millions, yeah. 1 million, that's for sure. But it's not 10 millions and okay. The console game. I feel it's definitely affordable. It's really about how you can find the best people for this type of game. Yeah. Because some people might really good at shooting games. Some people are really good at social games. Some people it's great at these kind of synchronization games. Yeah. Then find the best team for the game you want to make. Okay. Yes.
Kyu, do you have any view? I mean, from a figure. I know I don't want to. Obviously, games changes, but are those budgets reasonable, or you?
So when we work with developers, and in the past, we used to work with all different size developers. We even signed deals with a 2-man shop too. No, there was actually a 1-man shop too. But nowadays, if you ask me if I'm going to sign those deals, I'm not going to sign them because. Last year, the biggest change for us is that we've been changing from a product to a service company. Yeah. And the live operation is becoming more and more important, extremely important, in order to sustain the longevity of the game. And so if a development team can do proper live operations for mobile, I think they should be at least of 10-person team. So most of the deals that we sign, if you look at the developers, they're usually a 10 to 20 person team.
Yeah.
I think that's the ideal size that we've been working with. And I think for that same reason, the development budgets have been going up a lot.
Okay.
I think up to launch, in average, we're spending at least $2 million on a product these days.
Okay.
You know,
You don't have to interject if you don't want to. It's fine.
very quickly, I just wanted to share an insight. I'm from the US and I'm finding it so interesting that over here people talk about Asia a lot. In the US, somehow we have this blind spot that I'm seeing is that we don't talk a lot about Asia. And it's very exciting when I'm looking at this conversation from that point of view. And I think that also comes into the picture when we're talking about development cost, because we are looking at really building games for the market that we are in. We're not really thinking more about how we're going to distribute them across different regions. So when we are looking at building a game, I think one of the things that has worked out for some of the development deals that I've done is I've come to believe that for a mobile game, just purely a development budget is not enough. You need to sign up on a marketing budget as well. And purely just building the game won't get you far. So you need to kind of start putting in if certain marketing elements to it, and if those, when you launch the game, you meet those thresholds, you can then reevaluate your development budget. It's just become, like you said, like a live operation. It's not like you can bake the whole game and then sell it for a certain amount of units for a certain volume. That console mentality is kind of shifting to a more mobile mentality, where what I call it, and I've heard from a few folks, is like the previous was like the Hollywood version. You had to make the whole film and you threw it out at the box office and see how it did. Now we are in the TV series with the mobile. We build episodes, and as we go along, we see how those episodes are faring and then build more content. Yeah. So I think that's the analogy of when you're looking at putting into your development budget.
Okay. So any thoughts on the budgets? Anybody disagree with like $1 million plus over there?
So I actually agree. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to quickly echo what I think everybody else said, which is that when you're building an online game, whether it's mobile game or any other game, what you're doing is building the foundation of your service. And you then have to have enough money to operate that service until it's profitable. I think when we're seeing development budgets, the amount of additional money needed to make the service profitable is probably something like 50 to 100% of what the original development budget was. So if you're not giving yourself that amount of runway, you're probably going to crash and burn before you can generate enough money from your service to support yourself.
Okay, it's interesting. Good figure. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, and yeah, I totally agree with what has been said about getting the game out and then the cost of it. And I particularly want to highlight, we're in the age of like making games as a service. So exactly what the Deepika was talking about is that you can actually build a game and then build it with 2 level, 3 level, I don't know, like build it up to 10 level per se. But don't build all the content into it until you think that, this is going to work. And so that heavily reduce your investment up front. The other thing that you want to also look into is to make sure not just build it and then, even if it works and go back and build more, that's something that you should do, but also think about how you can exponential growth your game, because nowadays we're talking about all these app stores where you can touch many users in a matter of seconds, minutes, and all that good stuff. So you really need to line up your distribution mentality once you think your game is going to work out. So I think those are way more important than thinking about just how long you would have to spend your time making that one game. But on top of that is after you made it, how do you make this best game that you have made the most success that you can push it up to. So I think those are very, very important.
Okay, I've got loads more questions, but we haven't got loads of time. So I'm going to throw this open now to the audience, because there's some very high-powered, knowledgeable, smart guys here. So I'm assuming there's going to be some questions specifically to all of them, or one or more of them. We've got a mic coming on. Put your hands if you've got a question. is early. Over here, gentlemen. There you go.
I have to. Sorry. Yeah, mic on.
Mic on. Try again.
Try again. So, Chris, I like your question. To make it easier for the panel, can you put your hand up if you think you need now to spend $1 million on a game? So, everyone on the panel, if you think you need to pour more than $1 million in a game now to make a good mobile game. So, just hands up of the panel. Just the right-hand side, not the left. Okay, that answers the question. Brilliant.
Okay.
I can elaborate a little bit while we find the next person. I think that this is, since there is so many players available, I definitely think that there is still room for a lot of smaller games company like Mojang or Mediocre, some of my favorite Swedish guys who found a fan gathering and they are communicating directly with them and they don't need to be on the number one chart to make money to sustain the company.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. It's not necessarily just about that.
I just wanted to add on this is like, if you always look at the top 5, there's very little chance that you go in it in any country. However, there is still money, and our data shows that you don't have to be in the top 20 to make money. You can be in the top 100 and still make money. So you don't need a game that has $2 million investment to do that.
But again, fewer and fewer games are getting their money back, which is a sad fact.
Yeah, I just think that why I didn't put my hand up is that I think that it's massively oversimplifying. If you can think that okay, $1 million, is it enough or 2? I mean, it's like how much does it cost to build a good website? It's again like the whole thing there, and then there are like brilliant people out there, like one guy, like take Andreas Illiger, Tiny Wings, great game, one guy and few friends. So I think that it's again, of course it's not easy, but having $1 million for a game is no guarantee for like anything. And I think that the game itself is just a start, and then it really depends on what kind of approach you take. It's again like with the website that I'm sure you can build a good website for like $1 million, but there's no guarantee that it's going to be any good. And the same for games, for anything.
Okay. Any more questions from the audience? I've got one final question. Oh, there is luck. Okay.
Hello, I'm Patrick from LoopMe. Question to Stephen. Stephen, you were talking about multiple app stores in China. So distribution, you probably have to tackle different app stores, and you have probably your own app store through WeChat, as far as I understand. How do you see this evolving in Europe or in the US? Do you see a kind of a fragmentation in terms of the app stores also happening over here? Are you probably going to help it to get there through WeChat as well?
Well, I'm actually probably the wrong person to ask that question, but I will try and answer it. I mean, I think that, I'll answer the China part of the question. So, we have QQ Mobile, which we operate mostly as sort of an app store environment, and we have WeChat, which we're trying to operate as a more highly curated environment, where there's not really going to be a lot of games, and we're going to really try and manage the set of games on there. I think that in the Western world, so in North America, in Europe, it seems unlikely to me that there would be some sort of big fragmentation of the market and there somehow be all this crazy stuff going on. I also think that so many of the things that you need to operate a game in the West have become commoditized. So you don't need a platform operator to do payment channels because you can go rent them. You don't need the platform operator to do metrics because you can go get somebody's metrics package. I think in the emerging markets, there's still a big mess. And it's going to be, for a while, probably still necessary to work with strong local platform operators in those markets because the commodities to do payment channels, for example, won't be there. How WeChat turns out in the whole global market and where it goes and whether it stays a curated environment or becomes more like an app store.
Okay.
And whatever I tell you is probably wrong. So I'm going to be safe and say nothing.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap this up, I'm afraid, but these guys are around to ask questions. I'm going to ask for one last statement, very short, from each of you about what you think the key thing, 2014, key bit of advice, key trend. What is 2014? What are we going to be talking about next year that happened this year? Is it about Asian growth? Is it about consolidation to 10, 5 super publishers? Is it really strange noises appearing mysteriously? You start. Go for it, Perry.
Is it the key things about
Just any
2014?
one prediction.
One picture about
One
2014?
prediction for just anything.
Yeah. So I think there would be more games that can make 1 million a day in 2014.
Cool.
What we can see probably for 2013 is the rise of Google Play and emerging markets.
Well, I already, but my 5 cents is I'd rather have a great team than $1 million if I'm gonna make a hit.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think that this year might be like when mobile really takes off. Yeah, I think mobile will be big.
Steve, you have one prediction?
One prediction, the emerging markets will emerge, and faster than anybody thinks.
Okay, fair enough. We'll talk about that. That's coming on. The emerging markets are the last track of the day.
I think that we'll have interesting growth of demographics on the mobile, especially coming up with kids games and more games which probably don't suit the hardcore gamer for more casual gamers.
Cool.
I agree with all the before. To add something, I think more connected games, more advanced connected games.
Cool. And last but not least,
I have 2 points. One is real-time social interaction and the community games combined with PvE and PvP will be a trend. Another one is the team who can run the service and also dedicated can win more than 1 million per day.
Fantastic. Okay, give a big round of applause for our panel. Thank you very much.
Up.